What if the most important thing in your life, the paycheck that feeds you, the savings that protect you, the money you think you own, wasn't actually real? What if governments and central banks could create it out of nothing, erase its value overnight, and still convince you to trust it as sacred? It sounds like a conspiracy, but it isn't. It's reality. And the moment everything changed already happened, while the world was asleep. August 15, 1971, a quiet Sunday night. Americans gathered around their televisions as President Richard Nixon interrupted regular programming. Calm, steady, authoritative, he told the nation the United States would temporarily suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. In plain language, foreign governments could no longer trade their dollars for the gold that had always backed them. Temporary, he said. Emergency, he said. But it was permanent and revolutionary. That night, the link between money and reality was cut. The dollar was no longer a promise of something tangible. It became a promise of nothing but itself, faith in a government's word. To understand why that mattered, we have to rewind. After World War II, world leaders built the Bretton Woods system. Currencies were tied to the US dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold, $35 for 1 ounce. It worked. Inflation was tame, trade predictable, gold the ultimate anchor. But by the late 1960s, America was fighting an expensive war in Vietnam while funding massive social programs at home. Dollars poured out into the world faster than gold could keep up. Foreign governments began lining up to exchange paper for metal, and America realized it couldn't keep the promise. Nixon's announcement was meant as a stopgap, but no one ever reopened the gold window. By the mid-1970s, the world had entered a new era, money backed not by gold, but by decree. Economists called it fiat currency, from the Latin fiat, meaning let it be done. Money existed because governments said so. For the first time in modern history, there was no natural limit to how much could be created. What's remarkable is how quietly it happened. There were no riots the next morning. Grocery stores opened. Paychecks cleared. Life went on. The illusion held. But beneath the calm, something profound had shifted. Humanity had stepped into a system built entirely on trust. And once trust replaces scarcity, history warns, cracks always appear. Because this wasn't the first time money had been untethered from reality. The Romans learned that lesson the hard way. Their coinage, once solid silver, was slowly debased by emperors desperate to fund armies and extravagance. Nero reduced the silver in the denarius by 1/3. Successors pushed further until coins were mostly bronze washed with silver. Inflation exploded, confidence evaporated, barter replaced trade. An empire that prided itself on order collapsed because its money could no longer be trusted. And yet, the system insists this is normal. This is not just America's story. When the dollar left gold, every other major currency followed. Europe, Japan, China, all untethered, all playing the same game. Central banks manipulate interest rates, expand credit, and pray that trust holds. But history is clear. Trust holds until it doesn't. Look back at Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Crushed by war reparations, the government printed money to pay its bills. At first it worked. Factories reopened, workers were paid, the illusion of prosperity returned. But soon, prices doubled weekly, then daily. People carried wages in wheelbarrows. Children made kites from banknotes. When trust finally broke, the economy imploded, paving the road to extremism and war. Or look to Argentina, a nation that has defaulted 9 times in a century. Each time, the same story repeats. Overspend, inflate, collapse, reset. Citizens learn to hide US dollars under mattresses, to buy property instead of saving pesos, or more recently, to turn to cryptocurrency. That's what happens when money itself loses meaning. If history shows the pattern so clearly, why do we still believe it won't happen again, this time on a global scale? The United States isn't immune, Europe isn't immune, China isn't immune. The system we built after 1971 is globalized, interconnected, and fragile, held together by one thing: confidence. Once that confidence breaks, there is no easy path back. And yet, most people never stop to ask the simplest question: what is money? They treat it as if it were natural, permanent, unquestionable. But money is not a law of nature. It's a human invention, a story we agree to believe. Once upon a time, it was seashells or salt, then gold and silver. Later, paper backed by gold. Now, it's paper backed by nothing, or numbers glowing on a screen. Every evolution takes us further from something real, deeper into abstraction, and more vulnerable to manipulation. That brings us to the newest chapter: digital currency. Governments are racing to launch central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. They promise efficiency, speed, and convenience. But they also promise something else: control. Every transaction traceable, every account programmable, every citizen's financial life visible in real time. If money is already an illusion upheld by trust, imagine when that same system can decide, with a keystroke, whether your money works today or doesn't. Centuries later, the Yuan dynasty of China tried something new: paper money. It was brilliant at first, light, portable, convenient, but emperors discovered temptation. Why tax the people when you can print what you need? The presses ran hot, confidence ran cold. Inflation spiraled, merchants refused the paper, and the grand experiment ended in ruin. Do you see the pattern? Technology changes. Centuries change. The temptation does not. Whenever rulers separate money from real value, they always do. And every time, the public pays the price. Nixon's announcement in 1971 wasn't just a policy shift, it was a turning point for civilization. Rome collapsed, but the world survived. The Yuan dynasty fell, yet trade endured elsewhere. But the US dollar in 1971 was different. It wasn't just America's currency, it was the foundation of the entire global system. When it abandoned gold, the whole world followed. Currencies began to float freely. Central banks gained new powers. Governments discovered a dangerous kind of magic: the ability to create wealth from nothing. And at first, it seemed to work. Freed from gold, economies could grow without restraint. Central banks could cut rates to stimulate spending. Governments could spend recklessly, knowing they could always print or borrow more. The 1970s brought inflation and uncertainty, but the system didn't break. By the 1980s and 1990s, the new age of money had become normal. Economists even gave it a name: monetary policy. They believed they could manage the economy like an engineer fine-tuning a machine. Each crisis became another test, and every time the solution was the same: print, borrow, repeat. It worked for a while, but here's the hidden truth. Systems like this are not built for balance. They are built for momentum. Debt must grow. Money supply must expand. Trust must never stop. Like a shark that can't stop swimming, this system must keep moving or it dies. And that's where we are now, a world running entirely on faith. Since 1971, global debt has exploded to levels once unimaginable. In 1970, the U.S. national debt was around $370 billion. Today, it's over $34 trillion. The number is so vast it feels abstract, like counting stars in the sky. Yet the system depends on one fragile illusion, that no one will ever question it. Every crisis we've lived through, the dot-com crash, the housing collapse of 2008, the pandemic of 2020, was met with the same cure: more money, more debt, more intervention. We were told it was stability, but it wasn't stability. It was acceleration, and acceleration always carries a cost. You can see that cost every time you shop, every time you save. In 1971, 1 ounce of gold was $35. Today, it's more than $2,000. In the early 70s, the average American home cost around $25,000. Now it's nearly $400,000. Wages rose, but not enough to keep up. For most people, life in the fiat era has meant working harder, saving less, and paying more for everything. Some believe cryptocurrency is the answer. Bitcoin, born from the ashes of the 2008 crash, was designed as digital gold. It cannot be printed. Its supply is fixed. Its rules are written in code, not decrees. In theory, it offers escape from the endless inflation of fiat systems. But theory meets reality. Bitcoin is volatile, speculative, and not yet practical for everyday use. It may be part of the solution, or simply another chapter in the same old struggle between freedom and control. The deeper lesson isn't about gold, or Bitcoin, or paper bills. It's about power. Every time money is separated from something tangible, power shifts upward, to the rulers, the bankers, the corporations that control the system. Governments can spend without discipline. Banks can profit from bubbles they helped create. And ordinary citizens? They're left to bear the burden when it all unravels. That is the real legacy of 1971, the day money stopped being real, the day value became a belief, the day the foundation of the world's wealth turned into a promise with no anchor. So, what do we do with that knowledge? First, we stop pretending. We stop believing that debt doesn't matter, that inflation is temporary, that governments always know what they're doing. History has shouted the warning for centuries. We just stopped listening. Second, we learn. We study the system for what it is, a machine built on trust that will eventually break. Real protection doesn't come from chasing the next miracle investment. It comes from understanding how the machine works, how it fails, and how to survive the reset when it happens. Because the collapse of trust is never sudden. It's slow, invisible, creeping, until one day it's everywhere at once. The warning signs are not hard to see. They are written in every financial headline, in every shrinking paycheck, in every generation that works harder yet owns less. Since the day the dollar left gold, wealth has been shifting from savers to debtors, from workers to asset owners, from citizens to the institutions that print and lend the money. That imbalance defines the modern world. And it all comes back to one truth. When money loses its link to reality, those closest to the printer always win. Governments can spend beyond limits. Banks can profit from bubbles they helped create. And ordinary people, the ones who play by the rules, end up paying for the system's mistakes. That is the silent tax of inflation, the slow theft of value from those who hold money to those who create it. You can see the echoes across history. Rome's silver turned to dust. China's paper became worthless. Weimar's banknotes burned for heat. Argentina's currency collapsed again and again. Every era swore it was different. Every era ended the same. When trust dies, money dies. And when money dies, societies change forever. That is the true legacy of August 15, 1971. It wasn't just the end of the gold standard. It was the beginning of a new world, one where debt became infinite and faith replaced metal. The illusion worked for half a century, but illusions by nature must eventually fade. The question is not if this one will end, but how. Maybe it ends slowly, through inflation that eats away at savings until nothing feels secure. Maybe it ends suddenly, in a crisis of confidence that freezes markets overnight. Either way, the outcome is the same. Power returns to reality. The real assets, land, resources, skills, energy, reclaim their value. The rest evaporates like smoke. So what can we do? The answer isn't panic, it's preparation. Learn the system. Diversify beyond paper promises. Hold things the printers can't create. Real assets, useful skills, knowledge that endures. Understand that wealth is not what you own, but what you understand. Financial education is no longer optional, it is survival. Because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Rome's denarius, China's paper, Weimar's mark, Argentina's peso. Each verse tells the same story. When a civilization forgets that value must be earned, not printed, collapse becomes a teacher. And so, the day money stopped being real wasn't just a moment in 1971. It was a prophecy, a reminder that nothing man-made lasts forever, not even the paper we call wealth. When the next chapter begins, those who understand this truth will not be the ones who fall, they will be the ones who rebuild. Because when illusion burns away, only the real remains.